Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Same Old Arsenal podcast. My summer series um, is going to be a tough one for me tonight. I'm already welling up, but I would like to welcome to the show ex-referee, well, not ex-referee, retired referee Keith Hackett. Welcome to the
Yeah,
Same Old Arsenal.
delighted to be on the show. Thank you for the invite.
Well, this was planned a month ago, and the biggest thing
Mm,
I wanted to talk about was VAR, but obviously, as everybody knows, Kevin Campbell passed away on Saturday evening and a Saturday morning, sorry, in the early hours. And Alan, welcome to the show. We discussed whether we should go ahead, and I took your advice and some of Kevin's close friends' advice. And to be honest, Super Kev would be very annoyed with me if I didn't go ahead.
No, that's right, Amanda. He was such a positive person. And I said to you, didn't I, earlier that, I mean, we were all devastated when we heard the news, but you have to celebrate somebody's life, don't you? And there's plenty to celebrate when it came to Big Kev. So, I won't say happy to talk about it, but you know what I mean. He was a great lad. So
yeah,
it's nice to talk about him.
And what we're going to do, because obviously the show was going to be very different. The first part of the show, we are going to talk about VAR, and the second part of the show is going to be my memories, Keith's memories, and Alan's memories of the great Super Kev, because we've all got different memories, wonderful memories of him. And I know what he would have said to me, because going back on our past history, he and I hated VAR from day one. We just moaned about it constantly. And
yeah,
whenever a decision went our way, I would tweet him or WhatsApp him and go, I love VAR. And we would just laugh. But VAR is so controversial. And the problem is it's not actually VAR, it's the people behind it. This is where the problem is coming in. The actual technology should work, Keith. So
yeah,
you're our retired referee.
yeah.
I want your thoughts on it.
Right.
How it can be improved, and I'd like to tell you about my thoughts of what it's like being in a stadium as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a fan now in that sense. I go to games generally at grassroots level rather than at the professional level. Because to be honest with you, I stopped enjoying it when VAR was introduced. Now let me go back to my other role, which was the boss of the PGML and the introduction of professional referees. And as the boss of the PGML, I brought in technology. I followed Arsene Wenger in terms of the use of Prozone that gave absolute detailed information on each game and decisions made. I brought in sports scientists, nutritionists, running coaches, and changed the philosophy, even the warm-up sessions that you now see around the world. In terms of technology, I introduced the communication kits because as a referee running around at Highbury, I'd look across and try and find the assistant referee's flag in a sea of red and a red flag. And you used to peer and think, here comes another late decision. But generally, there'd be controversy around offside decisions. Then the next thing was I was at a place up north over the hill from me, and I was watching them play Tottenham Hotspur, and Roy Carroll dropped the ball over the line a good metre. And I was in the director's box as the boss of the PGMOL, running my eye over the referee at the time. That was Mark Clattenburg. He hadn't got a chance of seeing whether the ball had crossed the line. And neither had the assistant referee, because he'd pushed up towards the halfway line to be in line with the second rearmost defender. So that summer, I went in front of the owners, the managers, and said, we must have goal line technology. And then I personally worked with Orcar over a period of about a year, where the criteria that I wrote, when I think back, was done on the basis, I don't want a conversation. All I want is the referee to be informed the ball has crossed the line. Not nearly, not missed, just over the line. And that has operated pretty successfully because of the technology and the criteria. And that criteria laid a rule down in terms of how referees would operate. Now we come to VAR. There's no question that when you've got 22 cameras and a forensic investigation on every decision a referee makes, there needs to be a balancing mechanism. And then you need to look at how you can use technology. Let us talk about offside first of all. If we go back to that goal line technology, by the way, there's 7 cameras round each goal operating at 500 frames per second. They're inside the stadium, they're fixed. When we come to offsides under the current VAR operation, we're using broadcast speeds, and therefore the accuracy and the toenail offside is abject nonsense. It's not what the game needs. It's not what the technology can provide to the referee. And we've seen some, it's almost me wanting to throw my shoe at my television screen in frustration of watching the nonsense that's going off. So I then listened to and followed very closely about the semi-automated system in the World Cup. So when we look at what's being used now in this tournament, it uses its own cameras at high speeds, fixed in the roofs of the stadiums. It then has 29 tracking points on each player and the ball. And those tracking points are giving information 500 times a second. And it's using AI. The outcome is that it's a much more accurate system of determining if a player is in an offside position. Now, I'm not going to get into the nuances of quoting law and all that, but we have to say that the reason it's semi-automated is because being in an offside position is not an offence. What the judgment has to be is he interfering with an opponent? Is he gaining an advantage? So now we come to the practicalities. So therefore, for the last 2 years, I've been screaming out that the Premier League should introduce goal line technology. And it's gone from, a system where it's lost credibility because of how it's been operated. 5 years in its operation, and 5 years too long in the way that it is operated.
How easy would it be, Keith, and how expensive would it be to get that amount of cameras in for offside as well as Hawkeye goal line?
Well, I think that when you look at goal line technology in Hawkeye, that's in every stadium in the Premier League. Leave it alone because it's operated. We've had two errors in thousands of games, and that's one Aston Villa, Sheffield United, where I don't think the system was switched on. We were coming back from COVID, and I think they forgot. I mean, the system has to be calibrated before every game. We need this semi-automated system that will improve the accuracy and the speed at which the decision is made, which we're seeing in the game at the Euros. But then we have to revert back. And the simple thing is this. It's a bus driven around London without a driver and without a conductor taking any money. It's that bad. And the reason is, Alan, you wouldn't expect to play on a Saturday in a Premier League game, drive from, say, the north, that could be Newcastle, that could be Manchester, that could be the Midlands, down to Stockley Park, after having a Premier League game, at whatever time that is, and whatever time you're leaving the stadium, under your own steam, to drive to Stockley Park to be VAR the following day at 12:30. And that is happening. And so the shortfall to begin with is you've got to have VAR specialists. That's the first thing. And, why do we have goalkeepers and why did we have you as number 9 at Arsenal? Well, it's dead simple. You were good at number 9 and you played that position consistently and you got better and better and better. because you were doing it regularly. You started reading players, and the goalkeeper the same. And the VAR will operate much better when he's doing it or she's doing it week in, week out, game in, game out, and nothing else. And that's what we did with assistant referees. We said, we had an assistant referee running the line one week, refereeing the next, running the line. And I went, no, all we're going to have is those guys running the line. So that's the first bit. And I can't understand why the Premier League, when I was the boss, and that's 10 years ago, my turnover was 5 million. They're now spending 33 million on this organization. So it's not money that's the problem. So we have a problem of training, education, leadership in relation to the refereeing. At the head of that, and the decline in refereeing standards, has been Mike Riley, who's gone, fortunately, because I think he was in position a long time, but generally a bit of a disaster. So now we come to the fans in the stadium. Frankly, you're treated like monkeys. Your mushrooms, whatever word I can say, is that the game is doing you an utter disservice. And all they've got to do with football is look at rugby union. Use the big screen, interrogate the decision, and then sort out the mess and make a call. In terms of referees, yes.
Sorry, Graham. Keith, I was just going to say, has Howard Webb made noises to suggest we are going down that road in the near future?
Alan, it's a year. We put rockets in space in less time.
Talking about the year's time?
Well, I mean, look, they bring in the semi-automated system in the autumn. I mean, so that means it sort of unbalances the league generally. There's going to be decisions in that first half, offside decisions that are wrong, that are effectively put to bed, that are going to hopefully be rectified in the second half. So some clubs will benefit in a negative manner by having offside calls that are incorrect. So I think that if we look at VAR, I thought the submission by Wolves, 9 points that they submitted to the Premier League was substantial. They said, look, the first one, it impacts on the goal celebration and the spontaneous passion that makes football special. There's no question that is the case. They put the ball in the back of the net, and even in Euros, they're looking around to say, rather than actually seeing that, wow, it's a goal, it's what the game's about. And what we get, frustration and confusion, and then this problem that arises that comes into my inbox regularly, and that is one about the if you like, the referee's integrity being questioned, and I put it nicely in that way. So I do think at times it does create a more hostile atmosphere in the stadiums. The other side is, I think the VAR is completely overreaching their role. I think what we've seen the development of lazy refereeing or weak refereeing, however word you want to use, because they're hesitating. They get to the penalty area, and I think I saw one at Arsenal where it was the easiest penalty kick ever to give.
Well, I lost you there for 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was an easy penalty kick to give. Didn't give it. VAR rightly came in and gave it, and I just say to myself, really, that was the easiest penalty kick decision to give. It was a clear foul. There wasn't a question of denial and of an obvious goal scoring opportunity, and the referee should have had that one.
So can I just say, coming to the fans' perspective, okay, so Keith, Alan knows me, but you don't, Keith. So I've been going since you've been refereeing mid-70s to Highbury and all the way now to the Emirates. So I've seen it all. I've
Yeah.
seen the best referees, terrible I've seen it all. And I also watch plenty of other football, not
Yeah.
just Arsenal games. And during the 80s, we had things like Fergie time. We had referees. How can I put this? I don't even know if I can say it, but like when they were surrounded by United players, we
Yeah.
always felt that referees felt intimidated at Old Trafford. God forbid another team got a penalty there. It was like unheard of. But if I had my choice, that is exactly where I would go back to. Because when I'm sitting in that stadium, the first thing I think of when we score, the first thing is I get up and I go, oh, I
Yeah.
can't celebrate.
Yeah.
Now,
And
football is all about passion and celebrating. Now, obviously, there's the obvious ones that you probably know are not going to be um, disallowed. But there are ones that have been disallowed that I'm shocked at, and it
yeah.
ruins everything. It's ruined the game. The toenail, offsides, the fact that, look, as I've said off air, off air, that Arsenal fans do feel like there is an agenda. I do feel like every club feels like that.
Hmm.
And we will go through a couple of points that a lot of viewers of this podcast have raised. But I just want to say it's not improved it. It's made
No.
it worse for the football fan, because what goes on is I sit down, I'm looking at the screen. We know all it says is VAR is being discussed or whatever it is, looking for a possible handball. Everybody else who's watching on TV knows what's going on before we do. So,
Yeah.
Alan, you get it when you're doing your pundit. You know before anyone, because I've heard Gary Neville say before,
Yeah.
"Oh, the goal's been given," and
Yeah, I know
and
it's mad. We've got a VAR screen next to our monitor that we look at for replays and that, and we get certain conversations from the VAR team. We thought we were going to get all of the chats, but we don't. I think we'll get
Yeah.
muted for some of them, but. Yeah, we see certainly a lot more than than you do in the stadium, because you don't see anything in the
no,
stadium, do you?
and I'm
And
not
obviously people at home as well. And then we
absolutely.
get
Sorry, Al, I'm not into rugby, but I've watched it a couple of times and I've been once or twice. It's not really my sport, and I
No.
watch rugby. I watch rugby league. It is so different. It is nothing like it. Everything's explained. You're not sitting there in the stadium. We've been in the Emirates once for 4.5 minutes after a goal's been
Mm,
scored. How
mm,
outrageous is this? I do not want to waste another 25 minutes of extra time because VAR can't get it right. And you are 100% spot on, Keith. Referees have become lazy. They don't want to make the decisions. They don't have
No.
to make the decisions because
No.
VAR make the decision. And then if you are called back to the screen, 9 times out of 10, you'll give what the screen shows you because the referee's actually watching it in real time. It's listen, I, I'm not against referees. I'm quite a sensible football fan, Keith. You'll get to learn this during the pod. I'm not one of those that is, every ref is this, I believe that they've got a very hard job. VAR's made it harder, but sort of easier in some ways because they mess up. Either way, they got it in their ear. Linesmen don't seem to be doing anything anymore.
No. No.
They don't seem to be doing. I can see a foul right in front of me in the East Stand, and the linesman's there, but the referee gives it and he's halfway up the pitch. And I'm like, what's the linesman doing? So all this, and this is the problem with football now. This is all we're discussing. I'm telling you, every single game, this is all we're discussing, who the referee is. I never used to know referees in the 80s, Keith. When you were refereeing us, I never sat there and said to my dad, who's the referee today? I didn't
Yeah.
know your names. I didn't
Yeah.
need to know your names. You either had a good game or you didn't, in our opinion. You cannot have VAR for subjective decisions because, as I said off air as well, Alan and I could argue about a penalty all day long.
Yeah.
There is no right or wrong with subjective.
Yeah.
mm.
You
Well,
know,
I think
Sorry,
sorry,
Keith, I'm just going to say, offsides.
yes.
Do you think they should change the part of the body, for instance, that is offside? It can be any part of the body that can score a goal, but what about going just to your feet? It seems to me that it would be easier to draw the lines. You'd get to decisions more quickly, and it would seem a more sensible way forward, but I don't suppose there's too much chance of that happening, is there? Because you've got to go through IFAB and all the rest of it, haven't you?
Well, do you know, Alan, I've listened to the discussion in refereeing circles by those administrators that now run our game. And even Howard Webb saying we have to adhere by the IFAB rules and regulations. That's true. There's no question. But listen, I can go back many years when I was boss, and we had Sam Allardyce manipulating the law. And on one occasion, he put 2 attacking players on the goalpost, clearly in offside position. But at the time, the law interpretation could be that they're not offside. And I looked at that and had a discussion with the chief executive of the Premier League, Richard Scudamore, and said, we're not going to accept that we're going to give offside in that situation. And then we went back to the IFAB and said, literally, we didn't say quite stuff here. We just said, this is how we're going to interpret this aspect of the law. So when we talk about the IFAB, we have to recognize that the decision makers, the members of that board, are the English FA, Scottish FA, Welsh, and Irish FA, and FIFA. And yes, FIFA have the bigger votes. They have the majority in that sense. But that shouldn't stop us saying, look, this is not working for us in the English game. It works better in Europe because they still play with a sweeper in the main. And offsides, probably in games, are much less offside decisions made than in our game. But ultimately, whatever the law is, it's up to the quality of the referee and his colleagues to get it right. And what we've done is, in my day, we had 3 officials, 2 linesmen and me, and then all of a sudden we get a 4th official in case I fall over. Generally, that was the view, because he couldn't do anything else. Then they said, oh, it can be involved in law interpretation. And now there's a whole coach load going to the game. And instead of, and then I listened to that program with Howard Webb, and I'm not actually listening to the VAR saying stop the game. You need to look at a penalty kick. Stop the game. It's a potential red card. What we've got is a running commentary in the ear of the referee as the game is progressing. That's not the role of VAR. For me, I'll tell you, I'd pull the communication kit out of my ear and say, get lost. There's got to be in refereeing ownership. At the ultimate end of the day, you might have a team of 60 behind the scenes, and it's not as much as that, but at times it feels like it. And what we're getting in a weekend, in a weekend, we're seeing justification being put for a penalty kick decision that's a tight call. And in the same weekend, we've got another one where they're arguing the same case against a penalty kick that's not been awarded. All I used to do was keep it simple. Each couple of weeks, we'd come together and we'd have a series of video clips. Those might be foul challenges. Those might be decisions around illegal use of the arm and elbow and whatever. And as a consequence, we'd put those up on the screen, play them and play them and play them. And we'd say as a group, if this type of offence occurs, this is a foul. This is a penalty kick. We even got to analysing acts of simulation, because we determined at that time that there could be an act of simulation even with contact. And when we went to the IFAB and said, this is our interpretation, no, there can't be any contact on simulation. And I'm saying, sorry, there's manufactured contact with a trailing leg Here's some clips. Have a look at it. These are manufactured. These are players manipulating and taking advantage of the law and the way it's written. But I'm not drifting away from VAR. I can tell you this, that when Wolves came up with the idea that it'd scrap it, I was applauding them. And towards the end of the season, I was getting fed up because I do a column for the Daily Telegraph and I do various interviews. And all week, instead of looking at the wonderful skill sets of players that I used to admire, I'd run alongside Alan, and I'd go, wow, what a player, and others, Tony Adams and all those players, and we'd have a chat, and
But
they
me,
might,
we both know it's not. It's never going to be scrapped now, is it? The genie's
no,
out the bottle. The technology's
absolutely,
there. I
yeah,
just think it's how we use it. And I was mentioning earlier, wasn't I? There was an offside yesterday in the Euros that astounded me. Ronaldo was probably a couple of millimeters offside. And you thought this is going to take forever because it always does in the Premier League. And they somehow decided that he was offside within about 10 seconds. And I thought,
yeah.
wow, I wish we could do that in the Premier League.
Well,
Now, I
I
don't
think,
know. They did
yeah,
show, like, I don't know, 2 minutes afterwards, the automated offside images,
yeah.
which supposedly brought them to the right decision. But I don't know. If they're doing it, why can't we do it so quickly?
Well, I think this is why the Premier League, in retaining VAR, has said very clearly to Howard Webb, politely, I think, get your house in order and get these referees sorted. Alan, at the end of the day, you can have a reasonable career at the Premier League, but there's a time in which you say that career is now finished. At the same time, I look back and I had to make some major decisions in my role as the boss of the VAR because I had to say to one or two referees, frankly, you're not good enough for the Premier League level. And if you look at the playing aspect of this, you've got players who can play in the Premier League and there's players who cannot because they don't have the required skill sets or engine or whatever you want to put it. Referees are no different. So the first thing is you've got to sort out the referees who are going to do the job or not. That's the
Do you
first
think the
thing.
standards have dropped, Keith? The
Yes.
standards of refs, do you think they have dropped?
I think
Yeah.
so.
I mean,
Yeah.
is
I
that
mean,
partly because of the pressure, the extra scrutiny? I mean, it's a mad world in football now, isn't it?
yeah. I mean,
And so that affects them.
well, I think that generally it's the lack of leadership and education with these referees. I think the basis of fitness levels are good, but what they're not doing is retaining the consistency. And the way you keep the consistency going is not by threat; it's by actually saying, "Well, I've got 10 appointments this week on the Premier League, and I've got 26 referees or 20 referees. Those that are delivering performances at the standard and level that I expect, that I have set, if you do that, you're going to be out next week." So in that sense, you're keeping the rest on the toes and you're having to say, look, you work a bit harder. If you want a Premier League game, you've got to work hard and you've got to knock that guy off by performing better than the ones that are running out. But I think
Keith,
you've got, sorry.
sorry, can I just say, Keith, as a fan, can we just go back to a normal offside? Not toenail, not drawing lines. If you're offside, you're offside. Forget this interfering with play, because again, it's all subjective whether you think he's interfering with play or not. I just listen, in life, mistakes are made. We know that during the 80s and the 90s, it wasn't perfect. Of course, it wasn't. But I've always been taught by my father that results and decisions are swings and roundabouts through the season. They even themselves out. I am sick to death of VAR. I don't even want to do a show on VAR. I don't even want to discuss it. But we have to because it's in our lives. And
So
all
you
of a
want to get
sudden,
rid of it. You want to get rid of it, Amanda. The thing is with that, now
yes,
we've got it, and like 99.9% of decisions on offside are correct, technically, whether it's an armpit or not. When you have injustices moving forward, we'll be going absolutely mad about it because we've got used to the decisions being more or less correct with
okay.
VAR. So,
Yeah.
if Arsenal lose the league because the Man United player's offside, but they give him onside, we're going to be going mad
But
about it, aren't we?
Alan, let me go back to the decision, okay, at Newcastle. Back in November, where the ball was off the line, forget that part, possible offside, and the fact that I don't know who it was, but was jumping on Gabriel's back. It is a foul. It should never have been
Yeah, but
given.
that's subjective, isn't it?
Again, no, but the ball being out is not subjective, is it? Even Willock said it was out. He was shocked it was given in. Now,
Yeah, but
my
they
my
couldn't show.
point is, we lost 2 points that game. Don't remember if we lost or drew. My brain is a little bit fedaddled this week, but we lost the league by how many points this year? So it has happened, and I could go on to quite a few games of decisions not drawing lines, other decisions that goals weren't given. So, and I want to go back to what Keith said at the beginning. Were you talking about the Tottenham United game where the ball was 3/4 in the net and Roy Carroll pushed it out the net? Now at home, I'm screaming. I never, ever, ever want Tottenham to win. I don't even want them to win a throw in, but we wanted them to win that game to benefit Arsenal, and it wasn't given. Now, someone's telling us we did. We lost 1-0 at Newcastle. So there we go. There's the 3 points, 2 points possibility. So that game was so bad, Keith. That ball was 3/4 over the line. It wasn't even a little bit. It was so far over the line. So I get what Alan's saying. In that situation, VAR would have given that goal because it's way over.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But does it, Alan, does it weigh up the good and the bad? Is it worth having it when I'm sitting in a stadium and I can't celebrate a goal? I would just like to go back because my podcast brothers are not here, so they can't take the mickey out of me. You're at Anfield in 1989, Alan. That debate over whether you touched that ball, okay, would have gone on for how long?
I don't know. Well, to me, I don't think it would have gone on for very long because it was a clear
Yeah.
touch and I was clearly onside. But who knows with VAR these days?
Yeah.
Exactly. So the thrill we had at the best footballing night of an Arsenal life at Anfield was not tainted by VAR or that situation. The referee was in charge. Okay, we would have had to have gone with what he said. My point is, it's ruining fans in a stadium, in any stadium. I'm not just talking about the Emirates here. I'm talking about every game. Let's go to the one of the worst decisions I've ever seen was Tottenham Liverpool. What the actual? I cannot believe what I saw. So we understand what happened. He asked a question. It was misunderstood. He thought he said something else, and he thought he said something else. They disallowed the goal. But as soon as those idiots at Stockley Park realised that the ref had not understood, they can see he's disallowed it. What are they watching, Keith? So they've
Well,
realised that he's not given the goal. Then go back in his ear and go, no, no, no. We said give the goal, give the goal. The game went on, and
I think there's two things here. First of all, there's a scramble to improve the technology, and there's no question that semi-automated offside system will improve it. You'll still get toenail decisions until the law is amended. So that technology side is there for the Premier League to improve. They'll bring it in and it'll improve in the autumn in terms of the offside speed at which a decision is given. In terms of goals, it doesn't use the VAR system. It's got goal line technology, and that's direct to the referee's watch. So that technology bit is sorted generally between the referee and VAR. We now come down to the two major elements, and that first of all is VAR has not only undermined the game, it's undermined the referees. They don't
Yeah.
want to lose it, and Alan's right. They don't want to bin it. I'm saying bin it because at that time the Premier League was saying we're not going to introduce the semi-automated system. And I'll remind you of the 5 years. Year one, we introduced it 1 year late than, say, the MLS and other leagues around the world. We were saying we don't need it, the Premier League. Then, under pressure, they introduced it. And in that first year, they had all the monitors around the stadium. They never used them. And no referee went to the monitor to check a decision. So we started off using VAR criteria incorrectly because we're actually saying referee's not going to make the decision. He's going to tell you in your ear that that goal's disallowed, that's a penalty kick, that's offside. So it wasn't the way that IFAB laid out how it should operate. Year two, under pressure, Mike Riley and everybody's saying, you've got to use the monitors. He came out and said, we're going to use them sparingly. And in year two of the operation, they used them 3 times in 380 games. So they weren't after 2 years using it correctly. And then what we saw was the referees sauntering to the monitor, and instead of making their own decision and judgment, it's all a bit like a joke in a way. And it's not a joke because we're in a professional business. But we know, and you know as a fan, as soon as that guy's walking to the monitor, he's going to change his mind on whatever decision is given. And probably in 5 years, we've had 3 occurrences where the referees said, get lost, I'm sticking with what I've seen.
Yeah.
Now, so the whole operation of technology is, look, you can have a Ferrari, but you've got to learn to drive it. And if you don't drive it properly, you'll crash it. And this is what's happening with VAR. We're not seeing the improvement of its use in England, right? Because we've got the other side of the thing that operates that people don't talk about, but I do. You've got Michael Oliver. Let's say Michael Oliver is our number 1 referee. And his VAR today is a kid who's had 3 or 4 games on the Premier League. What is that kid who's only had 3 or 4 games going to do when he's confronted with a big decision and Michael Oliver's given a penalty kick? In his own mind, that kid's gone,
Yeah.
He must be right. It's Michael Oliver.
It's the hierarchy, isn't it? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's
it's human nature.
It is. And therefore, what you've got to do is you've got to have a rethink. And the Premier League, okay, they've said, right, we're keeping it. But that's not good enough. Because they should be saying to the IFAB, you might not want to play it on the big screens. We do.
The mad thing is, Keith, not every ground has got big screens.
Well,
Old Trafford, for one.
Well,
or Liverpool. They don't.
That's right. But then that's their problem. And their problem is, if you want to operate in the Premier League, you get the big screens.
Yeah.
And alternatively, you can put them on the side of the pitch perimeter. So
I mean, I'd like if VAR to be used in a more restricted way, really. I mean, how many times do we agonise over, was it a penalty, wasn't it a penalty? More often than not, the ref's in a good position. Yes, is he inside the box, is he outside the box? But, you know, quite often the ref's first instinct is correct, and what you see in slow motion is deceiving. So those really annoy me, and I think that's where we have to keep the authority with the referee. To
you can't have VAR decisions on subjective decisions. This is something that Kevin and I used to say all the time. It cannot be used for subjective. The thing is, what I don't see anymore is referees using their lines people. They don't use them anymore. I just go back to it. Just go back to goal line technology. Change bloody offside to normal offside that we've had for years. VAR is not the problem. It is the people behind it, Keith. We know that. They need to be trained. What about putting ex-players there that understand the game? You know, that played the game for years. Say for Alan, right? So Alan could could do an Arsenal-Leicester game, because you could not be accused of any bias. It would be very hard to say put like Michael Owen on an Arsenal game, or I understand that, but if you've got footballers that actually, ex-footballers that actually 100% understand the game, and I will say this as well, a lot of strikers nowadays, the simulations at penalties, leaving their legs there, whether they left it there, whether they didn't.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I was watching a program on Robert Perez last night saying that he never left a leg there. Now, come on, Perez, we know.
He was a
we
master at it. Yeah.
we know. I mean, honestly, and I'm an Arsenal fan and I love Bobby, but come on, we know. And I don't think strikers help the situation. Everything, as
No,
Alan
they
said,
certainly don't.
it's so scrutinized that, Keith, in your day it wasn't like this.
Well, I mean,
You had
look,
match of the day or
yeah.
grandstands. It
Well,
just
when we did a cup final, or we were out in Europe and whatever, then we did get that level. We got the scrutiny, but not the level at which we're at the moment. But let me just get back to your point about ex-professional players doing that particular role. I don't have a problem. When I took over the PGMOL, we had assessors assessing the referees, and there were former referees assessing the performance of referees. And I shocked the Premier League because I knocked on Richard Scudamore's door and said, I want ex-players and ex-managers to assess the referees' performances. And I introduced that panel.
Yeah.
They were paid by the Premier League. They were independent of the PGMOL, but they could talk to the manager of the clubs. They could have a debate within 3 days about the referee's performance. And they would listen to the pre-match instructions of the referee, and they would go in and do a critique with the referee, asking for clarification on various points. And it worked. So I'm at the moment, IFAB say we only want referees doing that role. But that's because they're protecting themselves. I think the reality is I don't have an issue with that. And I'm praising the Premier League, the PGMOL and the Premier League at the moment, because at last they've gone out and said, we want to encourage and run special course for 10 to 12 ex-players to become referees and transport them into the world of refereeing in the way that tennis and cricket and other sports do. So I don't have an issue with that. The real issue in refereeing, I think, is one, the quality of performance, the fact that this is a global game at the Premier League level, and the question is that we've got no communication with the fans in the stadium at times as to what's going off. Now, if we look, simple changes like the change that's been made by UEFA in these championships, only the captain of the team can talk to the referee. Now, you look at that and you think that's great, but see, I would have a referee run alongside me and say, that's a crap decision. You're having an off game today. And I'd go, well, you just missed an open goal, mate. You're not having a good game as well. But those level of conversations, but I was also, I'm not questioning any of the integrity and honesty. When you're faced with it, I think referees have to be fair. Let me give you an example. I
don't think referees are fair, to be honest.
Well, let me give you an example of how you manage players. I was faced many years ago at Old Trafford with a 21-man brawl.
Right, hold on. And this is something that one of our viewers, Carl, said, I want to hear Alan and Keith's memories of United Arsenal 20th of October 1990, please. And actually, I've got it written down.
Right.
Because you were the referee that day. Alan, you were on the pitch and the brawl just, well, talk to us about how you saw it.
Well, from my perspective, right, lack of homework, didn't realise that there might have been a conflict brewing prior to kickoff because of what had happened previously. But then we had a 16-second 21-man brawl. I sat back. I mean, I piled in to begin with. And then I'm thinking, you can go. He's going. I think he might go as well. I'm assured of that because I think in 23 years of refereeing Football League and the Premier League, I sent about 10 players off. So for me, my philosophy was, if I sent a player off, it was my failure. It was my failure to manage, control, and get in and understand that player. So we're faced with 21 man brawl, and I'm going, well, hold on, I might finish up here with a dozen. But who's piling in and creating the bomb, and who's actually trying to prevent? Who's actually holding back their colleagues? And you can get in a 16-second slot all sorts of pictures. I backed off and said, I'm not going to send anybody off. And why? That wasn't weakness. That was me actually saying, because the expectation is someone's going to go. But my view was, am I going to be fair and equitable in what I'm going to see and what I've seen? And what about the ones that I've missed that might have offended in a more, if you like, violent manner?
So,
Yeah.
Alan,
So I
from
them
your
on. And then
so
what I did was I didn't look at the video. I didn't look at the video and review it and replay it. I just put in my report, this is what happened. Up to that point, the game had been okay. It quietened down afterwards. It was a flashpoint. You deal with it. Now, that wasn't me being weak in refereeing terms. I could have sent 4 off and everybody said, oh, he's handled that really well. He sent 4 off. He's still in charge. But I would have gone away from that ground thinking how unfair that I've sent some players off and others should have followed. Or the alternative, actually, they were all, it wasn't as bad as what it first looked to be.
So, Alan, from your perspective, and then I'll say it from my perspective.
My perspective, well, the ball was played up to me and Gary Pallister kind of climbed above me and headed it down, and that's when it all kicked off.
Your fault.
No, yeah, it was my fault. Should have won the header. Nigel piled in, and then Brian McClare kicked Nigel. Yeah, and as Keith said, yeah, it all dated back to the quarter final of the FA Cup in '88 at Highbury when McClare missed a penalty and Nigel let him know what he thought of him. But yeah, I mean, the thing I remember about that, I did briefly go in there and try and separate a few, but then I stood from a distance and watched it all happen. It wasn't really a 21-man brawl. I was stood there with Dave Seaman. So maybe it was 19 or 20. But what I do remember afterwards is some of the lads saying what great punches they'd been able to land. Anders Limpar, I think, for one, he said, I really connected. I think he says, I cut McClare behind his ear. I think maybe Paul Davis landed a good punch. And obviously, you can't tell what's happened at the spur of the moment. Now, of course, VAR, they'd be pouring over it for 10 minutes before about 3 players got sent off. But yeah, it's so often these little melees are just people being separated, and a lot of it was, but there were some proper punches thrown as well.
Well, I mean,
I don't see often.
I mean, when I went to the disciplinary and the FA played those video clips, it was right. McClare did kick someone. You could see that very clearly, and the outcome of that, of course, was the points deduction. From my point of view, then as a referee, I determined, if this happens again, how do I avoid it? First of all, how alert am I to prevent it in the future? And out of that, we when I was the boss of the PGMOL, we created a criteria. And at that time, believe it or not, the assistant referees could not come on the field of play. So that was the first thing, that we would have the assistant, the linesman near the technical area to hold before he comes on and delays entry into the pitch towards the incident. The other guy comes on quickly, and they're assessing the situation. And then the referee, once it's calmed down, he's going to determine, are there any reds? And once he's issued reds, he'll then say, is there anyone else wanting a red? And issue that. If the assistant says he wants to go, then he goes. And then any yellows. And I think that you saw Howard Webb in the 1996 Carling Cup final, where Arsenal-Chelsea, where Arsene Wenger and Mourinho came on, when there was another explosion, out of which 3 players received a red card. And I think that both captains received a yellow card, handled in a much better way than the way I handled it. But mine was based on fairness and what I saw.
So
But
why did we
because
get deducted more points then than United?
I never understood that.
You must have landed more punches.
I think I understand it. As I said about the bias in the 80s towards United, that is being a very typical Arsenal fan, I know. But, I'm
It
actually
didn't
caught.
matter, Amanda.
No,
You know
I know
where
it
we
didn't.
stuck the 2 points, don't you?
I know, but you know what's funnier? There's a video of me entering a turnstile.
I've
It's
seen that.
Oh
Yeah,
my God, like a 20-year-old stroppy morning after the night before. Give us our 2 points back.
that's
Honestly, it
it.
haunts me to this day. But do you know what? We're 50 minutes into the show. It is absolutely incredible. Keith, I have to get you back because there's so much more I want to talk about. But obviously,
Yeah.
I do need to talk about Kevin, and I want to do a little tribute to him as well. And I know you were saying that you refereed him when he
Oh,
played.
well, obviously at Highbury, and even when he was at Everton, and I think he had a fair number of clubs because we kept bumping into each other at various levels of the game. Um, you know, I was really shocked. I mean, I wasn't aware he was ill. I think probably 3 or 4 weeks ago I'd done a podcast, and he had a lovely way of asking a question, and if you like, squeezing out an answer, but you then had to think about the question that you'd been given because it was well thought through. I'm sure it was off the cuff, but he was willing to give of himself through his experiences. And I think in the interviews that I've done with Kevin, I'm always forthright. I'm a Yorkshireman. I say as it is. And, I used to kick the door if I'd had a bad game. And I did have bad games. And that's the nature of a human being. I love the game. And the reason I love the game, I'm passionate about the game, is because, whatever stadium it is, I can remember refereeing at Highbury in midweek. And if I tell you, I think the kickoff might have been 7:45. At 3:00, I'm in a board meeting in Sheffield trying to get away to get to the game and drive down. And then you've got, you've got Martin Keown, Tony Adams, you might have Alan, all the players in that team. And it was and you're walking out on Highbury, you're walking into those. I know it's changed now. I've been to the new stadium, but like the Marble Arch and the tradition, and you think how honoured I am to actually be on this field running around it. And then I worked in Romford in Essex, believe it or not, and lived midweek in that part of the world. So on the odd occasion, I'd visit Highbury if I could get a ticket. Sometimes I couldn't get a ticket, and watch the games and watch the passion. Football's a disease, and we all live by that. But the point I'm trying to get across is the passion of Kevin as a player, the honesty, the strength, the speed. And sometimes a decision going across against him and that it give you a look and you knew that you got it wrong. The justification wasn't a screaming guy in your face. It was just a look. And the odd occasion where he might run alongside and say, "Are you sure?" And I'd say, "Probably not, but I've got to make a decision." In the interviews, we shared exactly the same view because, as I said, towards the end of last season and the way that VAR has been operated in 5 years and the undermining of match officials and the impact that that's having on grassroots football referees, where integrity is questioned because of what they're seeing at the Premier League level. And all the good things that you've put into the sports science of players, of referees to get them fitter, more mobile. And all of a sudden you see them hesitating on what is the obvious. And an example, look, let me give you an example. Michael Oliver, I think, is our number one referee, chased by Anthony Taylor, but he's regarded probably as our number one referee. He's pretty consistent. I think he needs to kick up the rear occasionally because he goes into easy mode when his alertness levels drop, his concentration drops. So I'm thinking at this Euros that the game's going really well for everybody. And I'm reflecting on what Kevin's telling me about, and I'm sharing his views on VAR. And I'm saying in Europe it's going to be better. And we've had a good start to the Euros, and then we come to Michael Oliver's game. And is it a penalty? Is it not a penalty? It's a penalty without doubt. And he gives a yellow card, and everybody accepts that. The problem is there's a law, and the law is the denial of an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. Even though the offence is inside the penalty area, if that offender is not making for a challenge for the ball, which on this occasion he didn't, then Michael Oliver should have given that player a red card, and he didn't. Now, that's my forensic examination of that performance. But that mention of that was that throughout that game, he played some really good advantages. He managed the game well. But it's the crucial, key, major incidents that I've got a higher expectation of them to apply the law and apply it correctly. So a Spanish player should have been sent off, and he didn't get sent off. That's the point.
And I think that Kevin's whole argument about VAR is everything we've said during it about the people behind it. But Alan, you played with him. Tell us your memories, and then I'll go into my memories of Kev.
Yeah, I mean, I remember him first coming across to train with the first team, not to be part of the first team squad, but George Graham would ask for him to come across from the youth team where Pat Rice was working his players on the adjoining pitch. And I always remember Stevie Bold and Tony Adams going, "Oh my God, Kev's coming across today. He's going to give us a bit of a battering," because he was just such a powerful lad, so enthusiastic, wanted to make his mark. And we'd do these an attacker against a defender 1v1s, and neither Baldy or Tone wanted to face Kev because he was a right old handful. And then of course he got into the first team permanently, and his breakthrough season, really, his standout one when he came to the fore was 1991 when we won the league, wasn't it? And on the times that I played with him, I forged a really good relationship with him. He was still learning the game, of course, but because he would attract defenders so much with his physical power and his pace and his ability, that freed up a little bit of space for others. But he had kind of heroes to follow, trailblazers. He came from South London, Brixton, and Paul Davis had already done that, come from south of the river. Rocky, of course, Mickey Thomas. So he kind of had people that he could take an example from, and it helped him to settle, I think, within that first team dressing room. Lads from similar backgrounds, lads that were made successes of themselves, and that would have encouraged him. And he obviously went on to forge a great career. But he was just such a positive lad, bubbly, smiley, popular with all the boys, but he also had a determination to do well. as we saw with how his career progressed. So, yeah, it was devastating to hear on Saturday that he'd passed. Alan Miller was another teammate of mine. Obviously, Rocky, a close family friend, and these boys were all young, taken far too soon. And yeah, Kev leaves a huge hole. He really does.
So yeah, and I going back to those days was when I first came across Super Kev, sitting in the East End as a teenage girl watching football. You know, Kevin and he often said to me, "I bet you were booing me from the East Stand upper, weren't you?" And of course I wasn't. No, I never do that. And I mean, how that I'm 55 next month. Can't even believe that's possible. But I've been watching football 50 years, and certain players make an impression on you. Hundreds and hundreds of players over the years that I've watched, not only Arsenal players. But my team is, the 80s. It's all of you. My special night, obviously. So to actually become very friendly with you and Kevin over the years has just been incredible for me. And I'm always so appreciative of your time. As you know, Al, you've been on lots of different podcasts where I've been, and I've always appreciated and thanked you for that. But Kevin and I came across each other actually when we were 17. I think you were there. I think it was like a junior gunners party or something in the Empire Rooms, late 80s. Got a picture of me and Kev, and I found it at my parents' house many years ago. All these old pictures of me, and there's one of me and you, Al, and when we were younger. And then jump forward 20 years and 30 years probably, Twitter happened. And I didn't really understand Twitter. I didn't really get the whole premise of the thing. I thought it was just following celebrities. And one of my friends went, "You'd love the banter on there about Arsenal." I said, "Well, who would want to talk to me about Arsenal?" Like, I didn't really get the social media aspect of that. Joined Twitter, and the rest is history. But Kevin and I, we sort of bantered a little bit. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is Super Kev," you know? Let alone talking to you, Al. It was like Super Kev, Alan Smith. I was like, this is amazing to actually with my heroes. Ian Wright was on there. It was just incredible. But Kev always would be so involved with Arsenal fans. It was an incredible thing to see. And not only Arsenal fans, he absolutely adored Everton, Notts Forest, Cardiff, all these other teams that he played for. Everyone sort of like drifted towards him. And I remember talking to Mark Flats, who obviously used to play for Arsenal, and saying to Mark, "Do you think you could get Kevin to follow me? Because I'm on this podcast and I'd love to talk to him about it." And I was only looking at my messages back from 2017. And our first private message was, "Thank you so much for following me. I'd love to invite you on a podcast." And from that moment on, we was great friends. And very, very good friends. Football podcast a lot. And when I set up a girls podcast, I said to him, "Would you come on?" He said, "Of course I will." Came on. And then myself and Sophie split away from the other girls. Kev came with us very regularly, and that's when the hybrid squad was built. So I brought him on that podcast. He stayed. Um, he is absolutely adored by the squad, is they're called, on the hybrid squad. I left the podcast for various reasons, and Kevin and I discussed it at length, and he knew it was right for me to go, and he stayed. And we've always been so close. When I went to the Etihad, as we know, Kevin lived in Manchester. I was always with him. He took me out for dinner one night with one of his close friends, who's actually in the chat room, John. He used to call John Red Nose John. And he's actually put, I think one of the biggest tributes to Kev is to say that the person who appeared on TV and was a top player was exactly the same person you met if you bumped him in the street. I couldn't have put it any better. than what John has just said. John is a massive red, obviously. Kev is a massive blue because of Everton, and the fun we had. And we went to a lovely restaurant in Manchester. I watched how everyone in the restaurant looked at Kevin, how the owner came up to Kevin and loved. Kevin had time for every single person he ever met. I was with him a lot when he went to the Emirates. Obviously, in Manchester, loads of times I've been up there. Used to go to his local O'Shea's, who were honestly, Alan, the funniest thing was we were playing United that day, and United fans were having a drink. And I think the Rangers Celtic match was on. He said, come in for lunch." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Because I'll go on the tram to Old Trafford." He was sitting somewhere else. And the United fans were coming up to him and were lovely to him. There was no problem because we were just about to play them. You know what United fans can be like. They loved him. He loved them. I've never been with him in a situation where no one. He's just lovely. He was just lovely to everybody. He was fantastic to my family. Um, and I've got some lovely videos of him wishing me happy birthday. And the reason I am PG is because of him. Because my name on Twitter is Princess Guna, Keith, and he called me PG and I called him KC.
Yeah.
And I took my name off the last 6-7 months. Just became Amanda because I thought people on Twitter were saying, "Oh, you're too old to be a princess," and I thought it's a bit cringy. I'm going to take the PG off, but I wouldn't be PG without Kevin Campbell. And I thought tonight I'm going to be PG. And the man is just, I'm devastated. And I want to thank everybody, and I mean this. I've had so many messages from when it was announced because unfortunately I did know he was ill. My last message with him was last month, and we were talking about the last game of the season. And I said, "Are you well enough to come to the Emirates?" He said, "No, PG." I said, "I hope your team wins because that's my mine and my family's thing to say about the Arsenal." And he sent me lots of little emojis, and he said, "We better win," and that is my last message. I knew he'd got quite ill, and I was in contact with quite a few people just to make sure that he knew I was thinking of him, and everybody else was anyway. And it's a great loss. You know, he leaves 2 sons. He leaves hundreds and hundreds of people that absolutely idolise him. I've had so many fantastic messages from Everton fans. He loved Everton. I used to honestly rib him when Arsenal played Everton. I go on social media. Go and tell him that you want the Gooners to win. He'd go, "Shh, PG, stop it, stop it." He'd like, because I knew deep down he was a Gooner in the North Bank. He played for them, played his childhood team. I mean, what a thing. And then obviously played for Everton, who they're absolutely devastated at the loss of Kevin.
Yeah. No.
And he
No, he
was
was special. He was special, Amanda. He really was. You know,
he
and all the boys we've chatted about it, and all the lads, his teammates have been so upset. Just can't believe it. Okay, he leaves such a big hole because he was such a big character, wasn't he? And such a great character, which he showed on the pitch down the years. You know, he had a lot about him. He really did. Such a friendly guy. It's awful.
and that's the thing. That's the friendliness and the fact that he loved people. He'd come to the Emirates and be mobbed, and he would never moan. Like I would joke and go, "Oh, they want a picture of me, not you," like laughing. And everyone would come up to me and go, "Can you take a picture of me and Kevin?" Cool. He'd smile at everybody. I've never seen him say, "No, go away." I'd never see it. He was absolutely wonderful to me, and I've been devastated since Saturday, and it's been very, very hard because I honestly thought he'd be able to get through. In my head, I was praying that he would. And the fact that, you know, I was sent a video by the Winslow Hotel today, which is near Goodison Park. And they showed me a video of Evertonians mobbing Kevin. It says it all. Wherever he goes, wherever he was, Alan, you know, I watched Righty Saturday evening. nearly crumbled on the TV to be asked so soon how he felt. And I think that is just, it just shows, unfortunately, Super Kev, who is no longer with us, who unfortunately has passed away, will never ever be forgotten. And may his memory always be a blessing. I found it really hard this week. Sorry. Um, Gone but never forgotten.
You know, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as someone who's supposed to be in conflict with players and coming across Kevin on the field, as I've said before, I think that, you know, having done one or two podcasts with him, his depth of knowledge, the questions, the warmth, and you're right. I mean, there's no question that Everton fans, in certainly some of the messages that I've seen and received, have recognised what he did for them. But you're right. He found time for everybody. It didn't matter what the age was. He'd have a conversation, and I think sometimes getting from the team and getting onto the bus when he was a player must have been a lengthy delay at times, because of this warmth that he projected to everybody.
Yeah, the warmth was 100%. And he used to rib me all the time. We used to just act like brother and sister. He was only 6 months younger than me. And on my birthday, send me videos, and I've still got them. And, you know, like, PG, come on, you're older than me. He just loved people, and people loved him. And it just showed what a man he was. Um, and Alan, I think it must have hit you all hard. And Alan Miller, as you said, he passed away as well.
Yeah, no, well, what was he, 55? I mean, it's no age, is it? It's and when you're similar, I mean, I'm older than Kev because obviously I was a senior player to him. So when somebody younger than yourself dies in that fashion, the same as Alan Miller, Rocky, yeah, I think it hits everybody hard. You know, it just reminds you of your own mortality, doesn't it? And reminds you to enjoy every day and to appreciate every day and to appreciate your loved ones, your friends, and to make the most of life. And you know, Kev did that, which was great.
And he did his early morning tweets as well, 4 5 a.m. that people have said they're all missing. So I'm trying to do some tweets, positivity. Some Evertonians are trying to do it as well, just try keep it going. Kev's legacy, as we say. But you know, may he rest in peace. He's probably up there going, oh, for God's sake, PG, get on with it. I just know what he'd be thinking. So I'd like to thank you both. It's been a very strange show because obviously I knew the part about a tribute to our wonderful Super Kev was coming. But Keith, I've really, really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to have you back on the show if you'd like to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime.
During the season, we're going to have to ask you certain controversial points that have happened during the game and stuff like
There'll be
that.
plenty of those.
Unfortunately, there will be. So thank you, Keith, for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Alan, as ever, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and sharing your thoughts on Kevin as well.
All right. No worries, Amanda. Well, nice to speak to you both. All the best, Keith. Good to see you.
It's been so fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All the best. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye, Al. Right, so it's just me left. I'd just like to say thank you for sticking with us and apologies for the tears. The podcast will be back tomorrow evening at 7:30 with Chris. He's going to be doing one in, one out, one bangs with some guests. I'm going to take another little break. I'm going to take another little break and we'll be back shortly with some more guests, maybe next month. But take care of yourself. Appreciate every day. Kiss your loved ones. I do apologise. And as Kev and I always say, always Arsenal. Good night, everyone.